In today's video, we are building a bed in the back of my box van, and I'm going to show you guys exactly how I did it. We're going to start today by removing all of this insulation because I'm going to be doing some work here in the framing. Now, before we start today, I want to give you guys a little idea of what I'm going to be doing here. So essentially the idea is going to be attaching some 2x4s in between the framing here. We'll be bolting these to the sides of the box van, taking advantage of the fact that the walls are pretty much just big pieces of plywood. And then I have these IKEA bed supports, crossbars, I can't remember right now. But these are used in IKEA bed frames, and they're super strong, and they're also adjustable in length, so you can pretty much set it to whatever length you want. And then we'll be attaching these to our 2x4s that are bolted to the sides of the van, and that will make up our bed. The first thing I'm having to figure out is what height to mount these 2x4s. It's a little more complicated than just mounting it at the height that I want the bed to be, because on top of the IKEA cross members, we'll have a piece of plywood that will be to support the mattress. And then of course the mattress has height to it as well. So depending on what thickness mattress we get, 4, 5, 6 inches, that is going to raise or lower our height closer to the ceiling. I'm trying to find the right balance between still having space underneath the bed in the garage area, but not feeling like I'm suffocating pressed up into the ceiling when I'm sleeping. Here is my really bad drawing, but just to give you guys an idea of where I'm going to be mounting this. So from the floor, the bottom of our window here that you see right back there, that starts at 42 inches. So if I leave 35 inches of space underneath the bed, 35 will be the height that we mount our IKEA support beams. Then we add another inch or so for the piece of plywood that's going to sit on top of those supports. I'm not sure exactly what thickness mattress I'll go with, but if I do go with about 6 inches or so, that will leave the top of the bed right about the bottom of the windows there. And ideally, I don't want to go too much higher because I want to be able to see out of the windows. So I think this is a pretty good balance point. Next, I'm going to cut out these sections of framing using my oscillating tool. And unfortunately, this is one of the few tools I have that is still corded. So I had to turn off my work light to do that, which is why it's a lot darker in here right now. This is just a scrap 2x4, so it's not quite long enough, but just to give you guys the idea, it's going to sit in there like this through the framing. We'll bolt this into the side of the van. This 2x4 will allow us to mount our bed frame brackets, and then these brackets will hold the IKEA support bars. It just happens to work out that I need two 48-inch pieces of 2x4, so I can just take this 2x4 8 foot long and cut it straight in half. The 2x4s are in, but basically the bed support rails are going to be in between these 2x4s, sitting on the brackets, probably something like that. This is kind of how it's going to go. It is very exciting to see this, to see a bed starting to form in the back of my van. I'm going to position this bracket pretty much as far towards the end. This right here is the 53-inch mark, and that is important because this is going to be the end of our bed. Our bed is going to be 53 inches long. I think one thing I'm going to do, and this is just a scrap piece, but I'm going to add a 2x2 on the very end, connecting from here to the other side of the van. And the reason I'm going to do that is because eventually I'll have a big divider separating the bed from the kitchen and the living area. Just picture a big piece of plywood going across. And then if I have this 2x2 here, it will just give me something to bolt that big piece of plywood to. So I'm not going to mount the first bracket on the very end. I'm going to mount it just a little bit inside to leave room for that 2x2. Now on the end, we're just going to position this as far as we can towards the back of the van. I know there's going to be maybe like 4 or 5 inches here of overhang, and ideally we would want this mounted at the very edge of the bed to support it. The reason I can't do that is because on the other side of the van, we have all of our wiring coming down in this section. And these brackets need to be in the same spot on each side. So can't have one here on the other side and this one here. They need to be completely even. I think I'll bolt a 2x2 or 2x4 to this back wall at the same height as these IKEA cross members. And then that way we have support on the very end of the bed as well. And then the 3 IKEA supports will still be the main thing holding it all up. And quick note on screws and hardware, because I was getting frustrated here for a sec, but the screws that you use here really matter. I'll show you. The brown screws there are the ones I started with, and then the silver screws are the new ones that I'm using now. As you guys can see with the brown screws though, they kind of have that tapered end to them. And this means that when you screw it in, if it's off center a little bit, it's gonna try and pull this bracket because of that tapered end to the screw. With these screws, however, they have that flat ends, pan head, and this, it just makes it so much easier to be able to keep this bracket straight. Working on getting all of these attached now, and then we'll test fit the IKEA supports. Well, it took way too long to measure all of this stuff out, but I just really wanted to make sure all of these measurements were super precise on both sides. Same height, same distance apart, all of that. All right, so all of the IKEA supports are installed, or kind of temporarily installed. Basically what I was doing is connecting them to the mounting brackets and just making sure they all lined up. And it seems like they do. So I am pretty happy about that. The other thing this is allowing me to test is just the height ratio between garage space and space up to the ceiling. I feel like I like the balance. I think it's pretty good. And the next thing we're gonna work on is bolting these 2x4s to the walls of the van. So one of the nice parts about having a box van like this is the walls are just FRP, which is fiberglass reinforced plywood. So it's basically just a piece of plywood with fiberglass on the inside and the outside. And that makes it super great for being able to attach things directly to the wall. So I just picked up some bolts and nuts, and we're just gonna through bolt these. But first I gotta measure out and mark all of the locations where we're gonna be drilling some holes. So this is a little bit scary because these 2x4s are essentially just floating in the wall right now, but they do support my weight, especially once we bolt these to the walls of the van. This should be a pretty solid setup. And what I love about it is that there isn't any bed frame underneath that's taking up space. We don't have any legs or any supports underneath in our garage area. So it's just a really low profile way to create a pretty sturdy bed. I already went through and marked out this little dot at where I want to drill each hole, and I'm going to start by marking them out with a center punch. So I just took my drill with a Forstner drill bit and drilled a bunch of holes into these mounting brackets. And here is why. So from the outside of the van, the bolt is going to come through to the inside. And then on the inside, to hold this to the wall, we are going to have a washer and a nut. So bolt on the outside coming through, washer and nut to hold it in place. And if you guys remember, this 2x4 is actually going to be part of the framing. Because I used 2x2s for my framing, this side on the 2x4 is the same width as the 2x2s. So this is actually going to be tucked behind the walls. Now because of that, I can't have a bolt or nut sticking out. So I needed to use this Forstner drill bit to recess it into the 2x4. Now an important thing to remember when using a Forstner drill bit, and I made this mistake the first time I was using these nuts require a socket to attach them. You need to make sure you remember that when you first drill your hole using this Forstner drill bit, you need to make sure it's big enough for the socket to fit in there so that you can tighten the nut. And once you drill a hole once, it is almost impossible to expand these to go up to a bigger size. It just does not really work. So you pretty much got one shot at it. What I recommend doing, what I did, is I just took a scrap piece. This is just a 2x3, super similar. And I drilled out a hole and made sure two things. One, I made sure the washers I plan to use will fit in there. They do. And then two, I made sure the socket that will fit on this nut, this one happens to be a 13 millimeter. I made sure that that will fit in this hole too, and it does. And once I did that, I was able to go through and drill out all of these holes that you see here in the center of the 2x4 where the bolt is going to come through. And now that we've drilled out the recessed area for the washer and nut to sit, you need to do this first. Now we are going to drill a hole straight through. Now that we've got our 2x4s all ready to go, next we can work on taking this aluminum, and I'm going to cut this basically to the same length of the 2x4, and that aluminum is going to go on the outside of the wall. So the 2x4 will be on the inside, the bolts will come through the wall, and then that aluminum bar will be kind of like basically like a big washer to spread out the weight, and that will just run along the side of the van here, holding it together. So that's kind of the plan. All right, one aluminum bracket is made. Now for the moment of truth to see if these measurements line up. Take some bolts here and attempt to thread them through. How do they not line up? All of the measurements are like identical. I'm stupid, I completely forgot that this aluminum strip is about 1/8 of an inch shorter than the 2x4, and all I had to do was flip it 180 degrees the way I measured it, and all of the bolts do line up. So that's all it was. It was just me being not smart. So next is going to actually be drilling holes in the side of our van, which I promise does not get any less scary. And before I took these 2x4s out, I've made these Sharpie lines that you might be able to see here. And then that way I know I get this 2x4 right back to the exact position it was in. I am going to start by just drilling, I think 2 holes on opposite ends. That way I can go outside and test fit and just make sure the aluminum works and that it lines up. It should, we just test fit it there. But just before we drill 6 holes, let's start small. So I know this may seem crazy, but I think what I'm going to do instead, because honestly this is one of those visual things where if it's not perfectly straight, it's really going to bother me. I think I'm going to drill the holes through the outside. They're probably not going to come out perfectly in those holes that we drilled in the 2x4, but if they are off a little bit, I think I can take a router to expand the hole around the 2x4 so that the washer can still fit in. I've got it flat here now in this position, so I think we'll drill the holes from the outside and do it that way. Okay, well you're not gonna believe it, but this hole I just drilled actually came out perfectly in the center of our hole on the 2x4. So maybe one of these was just slightly off and I got started with that, I'm not sure. So we got this thing centered, we got it level, and we have all of the 6 bolts attached from the outside. Let me show you guys how it looks on the inside. Sweet, so you can see those bolts come through into the areas that we drilled out with our Forstner drill bit earlier. But then the bolts are also flush too, and that way they won't interfere with our wall at all. Let's go ahead and do the same thing over here. Everything has been test fitted, and I just did a light sand along the inside of the wall here. And now our plan is to take some Loctite construction adhesive. We're going to use this on the inside to attach the 2x4 to the wall. Once we attach those on both sides, then we'll go to the outside. I'll switch over to Sikaflex. We'll use that to fill these holes, thread all of the bolts in, come inside and tighten them down, and then everything will be clamped together while the adhesive's dry. Now the downside to using Sikaflex like this is that it gets pretty messy. So basically, in order to hold these bolts, I'm having to use vice grips and then jamming a 2x4 into them to hold it, and then using my impact on the inside to tighten it down. This feels super solid already. Sweet, so this side is mounted. And I think this should be pretty solid between the construction adhesive and then all of these bolts and nuts that are holding it in place from the outside. All right, that took a little bit, but as you guys can see now, this 2x4 is bolted to the side of our box fan. The main reason I did the construction adhesive on the back is just to prevent squeaking. Sometimes with framing and stuff, if you don't use an adhesive, that stuff can squeak around a little bit. And now let's go to the outside of the van. So this is the bracket from the outside. The only reason I did the aluminum is just to spread out the weight of these bolts. I'm gonna get these like little decorative cap things, so it's not just like an exposed hex nut. It's gonna be like an actual cover there. And then you can see some of the Sikaflex there that has come through because I put big blobs of it to help seal off those holes. So I feel like it all looks pretty good. Honestly, I kind of like how it looks on the side of the van. I don't know, it kind of just looks cool. And this usually happens with different van build projects, but check out the mess I have made in here. This is a pretty good one. Now I don't see any reason why this wouldn't work, since I spent so much time trying to make precise measurements. We're just gonna test the IKEA bed slats or the bed supports and make sure they do still line up. I still think these things are such a cool idea to use for van builds because they're just so customizable and strong too. And I am totally trapping myself back here, huh? All right, 3. And yeah, these feel super great. The weight of the bed is gonna be distributed between all 3 of them, but even still, like, I feel totally confident putting all of my weight on just one in the middle of it too. All right, so the time has come to start cutting our piece of plywood that's gonna go on top of our bed. I thought about doing bed slats, but ultimately decided it was probably actually cheaper just to cut a piece of plywood. So we're gonna do that. I think I might be extremely stupid. I just tried to cut a 53 by 75 inch piece of plywood out of a 4x8 sheet. 53 inches by 75 inches. I don't know why I thought that would work. So I can't build the entire bed frame here today. I'm gonna have to divide it up into sections, which is totally fine. I did add what I could out of that 4x8 sheet, which is 53 inches wide by 48 inches long. And even though it's not complete, it's still really cool because it gives us an idea of how big the bed is going to be. I like it a lot. 53 inches is kind of a nice width. And then of course it's 75 from side to side, so I can sleep horizontally in the van, which is really cool. I am not very tall. I am like 5'9", 5'10" on a good day. So if you're a taller person, it might be a little bit more difficult to sleep horizontally in a van like this, but for someone short like me, it works out pretty well. Now the other thing while I'm sitting up here to think about is the ceiling height. So of course our mattress is going to lift me up quite a bit, but as of now, I mean, I can easily sit up comfortably in here. The ceiling again is going to be very, very thin, just like the walls, probably 1/4 inch at most. So we're not going to lose too much height. The biggest thing is going to be the mattress that's going to push us up closer to the roof here. So I spent a lot of time trying to find a good balance between space up top here, so I feel like I can comfortably sleep in bed, but also still space underneath the bed in the garage. So I will show you guys. This is how much we have right now. I don't have an exact measurement, but I feel like it is a good amount of space. I am really stoked about that because I know the battery system is going to take up a lot of room. I plan to have maybe a water filter, diesel heater, all of this stuff underneath the garage that's going to take up a lot of room. So I wanted to make sure I had room for all of that, but also for gear, equipment, tools, things like that I might be bringing with me. All right, so on the outside, my little caps arrived. You can see I already installed one. These are just going to cover the hex bolts. They are a very tight fit though. So I installed the little covers. They're just decorative. They don't really serve any purpose, but they just hide the end of the hex bolt that was visible before. So this is what it looks like on the outside. I honestly think it looks kind of cool. I know some of you guys might disagree with me, but I kind of like the aluminum. It matches with all of the other aluminum around the van. I don't know, I think it's kind of cool. So that is going to wrap it up for this video of building this bed support, this bed frame in the back of my van. Honestly, I'm super stoked with how it turned out, and I'm really happy I decided to go this route over building a bed frame with legs and all of that stuff. I just love how it's self-supported. We're using the sides of the van to hold this. It feels super sturdy, and we save space underneath in our garage area too. So I do apologize. I know we couldn't completely finish the bed in this one. I just don't have an extra piece of plywood to do so. And also I just have a million other things I'm trying to get done right now, so I don't have time to drill a bunch of holes and do all the ventilation systems in this plywood, but that will be coming later, and you guys will see that in a couple weeks later into this build. So we're definitely starting to get a little bit closer to building out the inside and designing the kitchen, the cabinets, all of the really exciting stuff that's going to make this van feel like a home. So I appreciate your guys' support. Thanks again for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.